y'all, welcome to your art kit. This is Carol Robin King, and I made a little video in case you want to follow along step by step, or you can just use the pictures that came with your painting kit. Have fun painting together with me. We're going to get started with our little pony here. So I've opened my green, my blue, and my Payne's gray, and my dark green as well, because I want to do a underwash on our background, which basically means you're putting a whole lot of paint, but not all the details. So when I have a little blue on our palette too, I'm not even cleaning my brush because I'm kind of going to go between these colors. Once I get to the light green, I will have to clean my brush. But what we want to do is put some nice dark color in here. We'll put highlights over the top of it later on, so don't fret. Try to go around your lines for your hair. A little of it can go over, but it won't cover this real dark color all that great. So try to go around it, around your lines. If your paint isn't flowing real freely, you can wet your brush. Just don't soak your paints too much. You never want more than about 30% water to your paints because it has a chemical process it goes through to attach as it cures. Even though it dries to the touch real quickly, it takes a while to cure. And during that process, those chemical reactions can be stopped if you get your paint too watered down. So don't try to use it like watercolors. I'll put dark over in the corners more than anywhere else. I'll throw in a little bit of blue to make it interesting. It's always nice to have some extra colors in your background. But in this case, in this particular little guy, we don't want to distract too much from him. So we're not doing a lot of detail in our background. We're just making it look like distant brush and trees and whatnot. Sort of a faded type, misty background. If you'll notice the shape of my moves with my brush, they're almost like X's. And the reason I do that is it gets into the grooves. These canvases, they have a little bit of a texture to them, and it's hard sometimes if you paint lightly. See how that leaves a lot of white? So if you get quite a bit of paint on your brush and do these little X marks, it will fill in all those little white shapes, and then you can go over it like I am right now and then make it look like you want it to look. I want it to look like trees, so I'm tapping my brush on what I already painted just to give it that tree-like texture. And we'll do more of that when we put a lighter color on it in a minute. I'm so glad that you joined me to paint this little guy. I have a lot of more art available on my website, paintingtogether.com. Check it out. This is his eyelashes sticking out right there. I don't want to lose that, forget where it is. So I'm just going to go around it. There we go. And now this is sort of fading into the foreground a bit where we want it to be lighter. So I'm going to grab some of my light green and put it over here. I didn't clean my brush yet because I'm not doing the highlights. But I do want this to appear a little bit lighter towards the front. And I don't want to lose my lines around this little guy's face. When you're watching this video, if you are a little experienced and you just need something to watch and don't want to listen, you can just mute it. Remember, you can pause it anytime you want and catch up or go get a coffee. And I'm just worried about filling this in right now. I'm not too concerned with detail. Grab a little more of that green. Down here it's grass, and so I can kind of start making it look like grass a little bit by just doing movements with my brush that imply an upward motion as opposed to in the trees where we were tapping to create tree texture. Down here, it's going to be grass. He's out in a pretty pasture and took a break from munching to look up at the camera. Okay, now I filled it in and covered my yellow, or covered my canvas, sorry. I filled it in and covered my canvas. So now I'm just going to put where that distant grass is and maybe add a little bit up front. When you're doing grass, don't try to make it perfectly even all the way across. Just throw the hint of it here and there, and that is sufficient to make it look like a field of grass. Doesn't have to have all the detail. Remember, it's sort of a faded back, or not faded, but it's sort of a muted background so that we don't take away attention from our pony. I'm adding a little bit of this dark color back in every now and then, just to appear to be shadows between grass layers. And then up here in our tree, we can start adding some highlights, but for that I'm going to clean my brush out a little bit. Not a complete clean, but just getting some of that darkness out so that my brush will work the way I want it to. Now I'm just adding some highlights to this tree back here. Every now and then I'm just going to blotch in some highlights to be like where the sun is hitting the tree. Again, not a whole lot of detail, just a little bit. And move your brush around, because otherwise you'll wind up with perfect square little squares everywhere because of the square end of the brush. So kind of remember to move it around and change shapes as you're doing this. You can add a little more blue here and there. Make it more interesting. But again, not trying to draw too much attention away from our little pony. A little more light green, I think. Maybe, ooh, that's a little too much. I'm going to show you how to tap it in if you get too much somewhere. And the way you do that is you just finish going ahead and spreading your color around, then wipe the excess off your brush over on your rag. And just come in here and use your brush that's been wiped off to sort of smooth that a little bit. And you can grab a little of those other colors and come around it to help it blend if your background dried a little bit on you. See how that just sort of took care? And I'm moving my brush around different directions too. Okay, I think our background is good enough, except for maybe a couple yellow highlights, but let's do that while it's still wet. I think it'll look better. Let's grab a little bit of this yellow and just put a little of that in our trees. Not too much. I don't want to make it too much, but maybe a little bit in our grass. Every little extra color that you add adds interest to your painting. So I like to add a few extra colors. I don't, sometimes I'll even throw a little red or brown into the grass, just adding some more color. Okay. I am going to put a little bit of this pony color into the background, I think. Just to tone down a little bit of these darker areas, maybe. Oh yeah, that's good. It just adds a little bit of interest, but it also tones down some of those dark areas so they're not too overwhelming. Maybe it's fall time and the leaves are starting to turn or something, and so there's a little bit of orange in those trees. There we go. And I told you, sometimes I add a little brown in the grass. This is dry brush. Dry brush means there's ever so slightly a tiny bit of paint on your brush. It's just almost imperceptible, but it's enough to just lay a little bit of color on your canvas without putting a bunch of paint on it. And it adds interest to your painting. Okay, now clean your brush out just a little bit. And we're going to fill in this whole pony with the burnt sienna, which is your number 4, and the raw sienna, which is your number 1. And the reason that we're mixing this a little bit is some areas are going to be darker than others. And so we're going to have both of them available here. We'll start with the darker and just start filling in our little pony. And if you're afraid you're going to lose your black lines, especially around the eyes, you can come in with, if you use you can come in with your fine paintbrush, or if you want to use a marker, but not a permanent marker. It should be an acrylic marker, because otherwise it will bleed through everything that you do from that point on. The permanent markers, they bleed through multiple layers, like 20 layers that still bleed through. And I tell you that from experience. I thought I would do an outline once with the permanent marker. I thought, oh, it'll be convenient. Not a good idea. I'm going to mark where my nose is because this color is really dark. So when I go over with my background color, it's going to bleed through a little bit so that I can see where it is. And that's just showing me where my neckline is. So this is what you do if you're concerned you're going to lose your lines, which is real easy to do. So that's why I'm going ahead and putting this on here. Okay. May as well go ahead and paint the middle of his eye black since we've got the little guy here. When I do pet portraits, I like to start with the eye because it's important to me that it looks right. I mean, that's where the personality and everything is going to be showing through. So I want to make sure that eye is right. So I'm putting some of the burnt sienna into the eye here so that it's not completely black in the middle. Okay, now we can go back to filling in our color. Those outlines that we just made are going to dry in a minute, so I'm just going to work on this lower section until they can dry enough that it won't be an issue. When we paint over it, it'll still bleed through a little bit because it's dried out. Instead of mixing with our new layer that we're putting on, it will be under there and show up a little bit since it's so much darker. Just like watercolors, acrylics is really all about the layers. You just don't have to be as picky with it like you do with watercolors, because in acrylics, if you mess up, you just paint over it. That's what I love about it. Next year, you get a lot better at painting, and next year you come back to this pony and go, you know what? I like that thing, but I did this wrong and I want to fix it. You can do it next year, because, and I'm not talking about in 2 weeks when it's next year. I'm talking about like a year from now. You can come back and continue to adjust acrylics, and the new layer will attach to the old layer as long as you don't water it down. So it is a wonderful medium for starting out with art because you can fix your mistakes. The trick is you need quality paint. If you get the cheap, like Walmart brand or Michael's brand or even the Hobby Lobby brand paint, they really are very watered down. They have a lot of fillers and very little pigment, which is what gives it its color, because pigment is expensive. So I usually recommend For beginners, you could even start with they do have a brand at Walmart and at every store called Liquitex. And a lot of colors in Liquitex are really good, except the white, the yellow, and the violet. Those lighter colors, they're so transparent because there's so many fillers in them that they just don't show up. So you could get just a better quality white, yellow, and violet, but you could still use the other colors with Liquitex and you'd be all right. The brand that I have in your kits is called Deco Art Americana, which actually has a pretty good yellow and white included in it, and you can get that at Michael's stores, Hobby Lobby stores. I think they carry it at Walmart online, but I don't remember seeing it in their actual stores recently. I dip into some of this lighter color down here on his nose. This is a raw sienna, and then the darker color is a burnt sienna. So my next grade up, if you start enjoying painting, would be Lucas. It's affordable. You can get it online on Amazon. You can get it at Dick Blick's. I'm not sure if Jerry's Artorama online carries it or not. My local Jerry's Artorama does in Knoxville. Great store. I teach lessons there in Knoxville. It's a fun place. So Lucas, Lukas, is my next level up brand. And as your business, if you decide that you want to do this as a business, or if you just really like using the best, then I would move on up to Golden, which is in the United States kind of our top of the line. There are other brands in other countries too, but in the US, most artists will consider Golden to be the top easily accessible acrylic paint. And it is very highly pigmented with very good binders. Binders are what holds the paint together and helps it attach to the canvas and whatnot. But you have to have a lot of pigment in it for it to look right. See how you can see my other color under there? So you can see those lines that we drew. They're still very visible. Well, they are to the naked eye. I'm not sure how well it's showing up on the camera, but I can see them quite clearly. If I zoom in a little bit, you will. Okay, can you see now the lines that I put in here before? See how they're visible? So that is, that's a good way to keep from losing where you are. So now we have our base color on. Not too worried about the hair right now. And the reason I didn't do a lot on his nose is we're going to add a little bit of blue down here on our brush. I didn't clean my brush. I'm just grabbing a little bit of blue and we'll mix it in. Let's grab a little bit of this raw sienna to make sort of a grayish muzzle. We'll add more detail to that in a minute, but it's always good to start putting in some of your base shadows and whatnot at this point. So now I'm going to grab a little of this Payne's Gray and a little of my burnt sienna and add some shadow under his neck so that when I do the hairs right there, they'll stand out really well. And then there is some hair down here. Get some more of that color there. Load some more of our Payne's Gray. And because there is hair down here, I am moving along with these lines. That's the reason I gave you these lines. Because in the winter, they get hair and they look real fuzzy. We used to have 6 horses, and they always look like little fuzzballs in the wintertime because they grow a longer coat. And then you have to brush it out in the summer because it starts to shed just like a dog sheds his winter coat. And you have to brush it out or they wind up with big old clumps on their coat. But they do love being brushed. And it is kind of relaxing and fun to sit there and brush a horse. Okay. Again, that's Payne's Gray and some burnt sienna. That's what I got on my brush. Just adding these shadows, and right under the hairline, there's some shadow as well. My brush strokes, I try to move along with the direction that the hair flows, except for right here where it's going up into the hair. It's got a little wind blown hair look there. Okay, let's take some of this darker color and put it right here. And the horses right in their forehead, especially ponies, and especially when they've got their winter coat, they got this little cowlick thing going on right in their foreheads, right about in here. And so that's what I tried to put into this little pony, as he's got this little cowlick. So his hair is sort of twisting around right there. And we can use our small brush to give more detail, but right now we're just putting in our shadows. It's all about the layers, remember? You need at least quick tip, you need at least 3 tones to make anything look realistic or 3D. You need a mid-tone, a shadow, and a highlight. So we installed our mid-tone when we colored the whole thing, and then we did some shadows when we mixed a little Payne's Gray with it, and then we'll be adding some highlights to it. I like to actually have 5 to 8 layers as a general rule, but we'll be adding some highlights to have our minimum 3 layers here in a few moments. There's a little bit of a shadow under his eye and coming down here. This is where the top of the cheekbone is. And there's always a little bit of a hollow right in here where there's some shadow and the way the horse is shaped. And then it comes up to the top here where the light hits it. So if you can get the shape right, his head will always look right. There's a little bit of shadow right in there too with that hair. It's dark right in here. I'm going to go over that with hair, so don't worry too much about that looking like it's a little out of shape. Don't worry about it. You can switch to your smaller brush if you want. I'm comfortable with this one. So I'm doing this right here. A little bit of shadow under there. I am going to grab a little bit of blue because that is supposed to be a little bit grayer down right here under the eye. And that blue will help us find that gray when we put our highlights in. It also gives it a nice little shadowy color. In all shadows, there's always a little bit of blue. In nature, you have to really look for it, but it is there. So I do like to add a little blue into my shadow areas. Okay, I'm going to clean that brush. We're going to move to the smaller brush and start working on this eyeball. Okay. Back with my little brush. This is the liner that I gave you. It's a little number 2, I think. Number 2 or 3 round. Okay, now we're going to open up our white. I'm going to put a little white on the palette. There's not a lot of white right here. Actually, I'm going to move his highlight over to the left because I don't want it to interfere with his little lashes that are right there. So I'm going to darken that back up. And then there is ever the slightest line around the bottom of his eye that helps it stand out. It's almost dry brush. I don't have a lot of paint on my brush there. I grab a little black and touch that. There we go. That's better. Now we can outline the bottom of his eye nice and thick with the black. If you're not getting a fine line, dip your brush in the water. That won't be over 30%. It's just putting a tiny bit on the brush. But that helps the hairs stay at a point better so that you can make a good line. We are going to go ahead and show this outline right here a little more obviously. That's almost dry brushing right there, but and then right at the top of his eye, you can see that really well, the dark. And we'll go ahead and darken that middle pupil just a hair too. Okay, I'll go ahead and do the inner ear right here while I got that darkness on my brush. And we'll go ahead and do his nostril while I've got that black or Payne's gray on here. Payne's gray is pretty much black. I use it, quick tip, instead of black because black has a tendency to dull things. It's a very dull color. Whereas Payne's gray, if you mix another color with it, it will darken it, but it doesn't look dull and sad. It still can leave the brightness of that color. It just darkens the color a little bit while still maintaining some brightness, which is important. Let's give this guy his little nostril on the other side. And then there's a little bit of a shadow on his lip down here. I'm almost dry brushing a little bit, but I'm just not reloading my brush because I don't want it to be real dark. I just want to hint at some of this color. See how it's allowing the brown to show through, but it's just giving it some shadow. That's because I didn't reload my brush. I just allowed the brush to almost run out of color. And then I can do this dry brush technique on here. I'm going to dip into a little bit of white and make it gray. There's a lot of gray in the muzzle as a general rule because they don't have like hair on their muzzle. It's just soft and fuzzy. Oh my dear, it's so soft. If you've ever been nuzzled by a horse, their muzzle is very soft. We had a little pony named Half Pint when my boys were little. And my 8-year-old went out there and broke that pony. He had grown up and broke means you trained him to be ridden. That little pony had grown up in a wild field. Somebody left about a couple of ponies in a field and just forgot about them. And the guy bought the property and it had about 30 little ponies just running wild on it. So we went and got a good deal on one of those little ponies. He was so cute, about 30 inches tall. And my boys did the 4-H with him. But my Daniel, he had a blast going out there and training that little pony. He thought that was so much fun. And then we trained him how to pull a little cart so my boys could ride around the yard in the cart. That little pony was spoiled too. He was a happy little guy. Everybody loved Half Pint. Down here, I'm using that gray for this little part where the muzzle meets the nose. That's a little too dark, light, but it's the lights hitting that little opening there, and it allows it to look kind of like the light's hitting it, and it has a little lighter area. Same thing right here. It's just a little bit lighter where the light hits it. And right above here. We'll add some more color to this in a little bit, but right now we're just getting our highlights in. A little bit of the highlights in, just so we can tell the shape, the basic shape that we're going for here. I want you to be able to tell that this muzzle doesn't have hair and it's soft and it's let's see here, a little gray. We need a little more gray on under his lip because he doesn't have hair down there, so it should be gray. It's usually the color of the hide under the skin is kind of gray, so that's the reason we're doing the gray. I can see I've got a little bit of white from my canvas showing through here, so I'm filling it in a little bit. I don't want that white from the canvas showing so much. A little bit is okay, but not a lot. Okay, I'm going into that lighter color a little bit, right up here where the hair is starting to meet the muzzle. Got a little bit of this lighter raw sienna. I didn't clean my brush, and so it's sort of a mixed color. Okay, now I did clean my brush. Going to grab a little bit of this Payne's Gray. This is my middle mixing area here, in case you didn't notice that. A little bit of my Payne's Gray, a little bit of the white, a little bit of the raw sienna, and that makes this sort of a tan gray, which is perfect for right around the mouth here. Again, I'm mostly dry brushing. I didn't have a lot of paint on my brush on purpose. Just wanted to be able to put some highlights on there. Okay, now let's work on this eye. That same color, which looks a little tan, we're going to put a little highlight right down here where there's a layer of skin under the eye. It's like a little roll of skin. And we're going to lighten that up just a little bit. Dry brush, so I'm not completely filling in everything. And right up top, I'm going to put a little bit of that right here. And let's go ahead and grab the tan, or the raw sienna, and a little bit of white. And to make this really light tan color, we'll do his eyelashes. We want those to stand out. And while we've got that color, we can do that over here on his eyelash that comes out the other side. Okay, let's put a little darker right above this right here. And I'm dry brushing because I want it to look like it's rounded. And so if you want something to look rounded, you can dry brush on either side of the line. See how that's a line right there? But I'm dry brushing under it and above it, and it makes it look like it's rounded. I grab a little bit of blue and mix it in here, because this should not be bright. It should be dark down here. Need a little water on that. Okay, that's better. Then we're going to take some of our burnt sienna with a little bit of Payne's Gray. I did rinse my brush. And I'm just going to go ahead and add some more browns to the eye here. Make it look a little bit bigger. And you can add some straight burnt sienna on there also to make a almost a highlight. Okay. That makes his eye stand out pretty well. I do want to make it look a little bit bigger by darkening this area down here. Okay. Now, a lot of this hair texture, you could do it with your fine brush, or you can do it with the heavier brush. I'll show you both ways. I'm going to get a little water on my brush, grab this raw sienna, and if you come at it at an angle like this and do it very softly, you can create some hair texture, because he's in his winter coat, remember? That just gives it a little bit. However, if you prefer to work with the smaller brush, you can also do it with that. You do have a little more control with the shape of the hairs that way. And we're not doing this throughout the whole thing. It's just some occasional highlights. Remember, we had a line right there in our drawing. And that was just showing that there's hair highlights right there. You can have the paint even a little bit thicker on your brush when you do this. And it will provide a little bit of texture even. And down here where the sunlight is hitting our little pony's hair, we're going to come out. It's almost like I'm just doing this little swooping motion just to bring his hair out a little bit, because it is kind of long and so it's sticking out. And then in a minute when we do our final highlights, we're going to highlight that hair and it'll look like the sun is hitting it. It'll look really cool. A little bit of a highlight here going down into his chest. And right at the top of his nose as he goes down, it is lighter. And we will also put a highlight on that also, but right behind the highlight there's still some light color. A little more water on my brush. My paint was a little too thick. We do the same thing here because he's got some hair coming out on his forehead. It's kind of thick. Right around that cowlick, it usually does that. Let that cowlick stand out a little bit right here. Just remember imagine the cowlick in the middle and the hair has to go around it. I'm using this raw sienna to fill in the underside of our hair. We're going to use some oranges and yellows to do highlights on it. We're almost done. Now I know when you watch me, you're like, oh, that looks so easy when she does it. That's because I've been doing this for 40 years. It's just like anything that you love doing, the more you do it, the better you get. Some people say I was born with such a gift. I think the gift was just the love of it because I wanted to do it a lot. You know, Mom said I started drawing and coloring and it would make me sit still when I was 3, which was pretty big task for somebody with ADHD, which they didn't diagnose in those days, but as an adult, I'm still kind of there. So it made me sit still. I was fascinated by it, absolutely fascinated. So the more you do something, the better you get, just like a piano player or violin practicing or accountants, whatever it is that you're doing that you love doing, you do it more and you get better at it. It just happens naturally. Need a little more water on that brush because it's kind of going on a little dry and I don't want it dry. I know I'm filling in a big area, but I'm not using my big brush because I want these hair shapes. So I'm at least doing the edges with this narrow brush so I can get some of these hair shapes coming out. Big brush doesn't make those quite as well. Okay, now I can switch to my big brush. By the way, acrylic paints, they do dry fast, and so always keep your brushes rinsed. Because if you stop and walk away, even just for a few minutes, the paint can dry on your brush. So stick it in your water jar, water bowl, whatever you're using, and or rinse it off really well because that acrylic paint will dry on that brush and it's next to impossible to get it off. And if you're having your kids paint, remind them because you will be buying a lot of paintbrushes. That's the voice of experience talking. A little more highlights while I got this lighter color on here. Remember I told you about putting extra colors in. The more colors you put in, even just in little highlights here and there, it just makes the painting more interesting. Right behind his ear here, there's some light hitting it. And then his cheek. Okay. I think his area right under his eye needs to be a little bit lighter. Acrylics dry darker by about 30% usually. So sometimes you'll paint something and then you'll look back at it and you'll go, where did that go? It sort of faded away. And you have to go and lighten it just a little bit more than what you had it. It's all part of the process. It's looking at it and saying, I need to tweak that. Okay, I'm going to go into some of this raw sienna, but I'm going to mix a little bit of my orange with it. Right behind his ear, the highlights start. I'm not covering everything. I'm just occasionally putting a highlight on here, and it just makes it look like the winter coat. Let's add a little yellow and see what that does to it. It helps it stand out even a little bit more, which is good. This is just every now and then, because the eye will finish it out. You don't want to give all the details. You got to let the eye fill in the details. Otherwise, may as well just go take a picture. So in art, we add what we see that the camera doesn't see, and we let the eye fill in the details, so that sometimes, actually most of the time, when people look at art, one person will see one thing and that stands out to them, and another person, something different stands out to them. And that's the fascinating thing about art. And you always want to leave just enough detail unfinished so that the person can fill it in with what they see in your painting. Let's give him a little bit of this hair here. Don't make his this little chin area has some hair on it, and if you make it too long, he's gonna look like a billy goat. So don't make it too long. Just a little bit of fuzz down here. And we can put a little of that golden color as a reflection on the bottom of, on the top of his lip there. And even maybe a little bit right in there. Okay, now we're going to take our, I still have that color on my brush, right? Because I want some of those colors in there. But I'm going to create my highlights by adding white to it. So this isn't bright white. That would be too white. But I've got some of that other color that we were just painting with. A little bit of the yellow, a little bit of the raw sienna on my brush. And that allows us to put a highlight down here. And a little bit right there to make sure he stands out. And right up here on top where the light hits his hair is very light. So just picture how the light might be hitting the top of his hair. And add a little more yellow to this. Remember, it's white, a little bit of the raw sienna, and some yellow. And then we're going to put highlights up here on the hair. Bring it down just a little bit, but not all the way. A little bit of that is dry brush, but I'm adding just a hair more water so that it won't be quite as dry brush. I want to see some of those hairs to be obvious. I'm bringing it down a little bit. You don't want it just at the top. You got to bring it down a little bit where it joins the rest of the hair. And then we can add some of that yellow or that orange. Start putting a little bit of that orange in there because the reflections of the light with the color of the pony that's kind of reddish brown. When the light hits it, the yellow of the sunlight makes that look kind of orange. So we're adding a little bit of orange in there. Also, if you take your orange and mix it with some of your burnt sienna, it makes a really nice color. Which we will put right in here as a transition from the highlights. And we can use this color, maybe a little lighter. We want to be able to see the front of his forehead against the trees in the background, so we need to add some of this, maybe a little orange with a little bit of the burnt sienna and a little bit of yellow. That should make it light enough to stand out. We want this to stand out. And while you're at it, you can put a few of those little highlights on his cowlick. And lighten that just a little more. This is a nice color. Again, behind the ear, it didn't show up very well with that other color. So I'm putting my highlights in with this lighter color because I know it's going to darken a little bit. So when it darkens a little bit, it'll be just about right. It's all about the layers, remember? The way you want his forehead to look is you want this shape to look like this, okay? But it's kind of rough because of the hair. But overall, the basic shape of this forehead over our little shadows that we painted earlier, you want it to look like his forehead is going like this because that's the shape of the forehead. If it looks a little flat, just go back and fix it. And remember, round. And you can come in with some of your highlights even and highlight a few of those hairs like they're getting a little sunlight also. I want the front of that ear to stand out real well. And I want the back of the ear, the light behind the back of the ear to be brighter. So I'm going to grab some more yellow. I'll clean my brush before I dip in my white so I won't ruin it. Just yellow and white, pure yellow with white. Makes some really nice highlights. Okay, that ear looks a little funny, so I'm going to reshape it so I can find it again. There we go. The hair is on the back side, so I need to be able to see the shape of the ear. A little more of these highlights while I've got this on my brush. Around his eye to draw attention to that area. A little bit of that orangey color. I'm actually going to lighten this little area under his eye even just a little bit more. Dry brush. I just really want that to stand out. Same with his eye lashes. I'm going to take some of that yellow that we did on his hair and just make those puppies pop. Taking some straight burnt sienna, just pure, filling in any spots that I feel need filling in. If you brush it like that, you won't lose your color underneath, but you fill in any little white areas. I had a little bit of white right there. I didn't want it to show up. Right there, see right there. Okay, so let's put a little shadow around his lip so that it looks like it's rounded. I think we're just about done here. More of the shadow is under the lip than over it. I'm doing dry brush right here. A little shadow under the nose, nostril. A little shadow on this side of the nostril because they sort of poke up a little bit. Kind of lost our shape of that right there, so I'm just giving him back his lower lip. Can't lose the lower lip. I did that with my finger just now. If you ever have an area that you're like, oh, that needs to be a little bit smoother, you can always rub it with your finger and it sort of removes just a little bit of the paint and blends it. Speaking of blending, I'm going to grab a little bit of burnt sienna and put it under this highlight because I think it's a little too wild. Maybe not wild enough up here. I want to be able to see the top of his face where it's getting some of that light. And stand out those hairs a little bit more. Okay, the only other thing is I do think we need a little bit more light color highlights on his coat. So I'm taking a little bit of my raw sienna and adding some yellow to it. And we're just going to put some little lines so that we can see his hair. And sort of give a little definition to his some of these areas. A little more. You can even put a touch of white in it if you want to. If it's not too light. This is going to darken when it dries, so don't freak out. It's not really all that dark. As it dries in a little bit, it's going to look different. And right up here, I want the front of his coat to stand out more where the sun is hitting it. He's basically got the sun behind him, and that's why it's all standing out like this. Let's put a little highlight again above his eyebrow just to make his eye pop a little more. Just brings the eye back into that area a little bit more. I think he's done. Make this little calyx stand out just a little bit more. I think we can say the little squirt is done. I hope that you enjoyed painting that and that you come back and try some more of my art kits, or go online to paintingtogether.com and join the monthly membership club where you get your choice watercolors or acrylics. And I have lessons for both. The acrylics, I do have monthly art kits that will be sent out to you with everything included. On the watercolors, it's just a monthly lesson that gets uploaded. And I'm just blending this shadow under his lip a little bit because it was too blending that shadow under his lip just a little bit. Okay. Let's put some highlights on our grass right where the sun hits it before we finish off. Remember I told you adding extra color makes it more interesting. You can add some pure yellow to the hair too, which makes it look like the sun's hitting it. I'm just putting just strokes, not too much detail, just throwing in some yellow where the sun's hitting his hair. It just sort of makes it pop. Blend it a little bit if it's too wild. Wipe a little of that out. I didn't like the way that bottom one looked. There we go. I like that. That made him pop a little better. Well, there you go. I hope you had fun painting this beautiful little pony. And I hope that you do it again and maybe try another one of my art kits.